At 8 months pregnant, I thought my baby shower would be the happiest day of my life. But then my sister showed up late, heels clicking, smile dripping with judgment, and dropped a broken, rusted stroller in front of me like a sick joke. The whole room went silent, my cheeks were burning, and just when I thought I couldn't be more humiliated, my husband calmly stood up, walked over, pressed a hidden button, and what happened next? No one in that room saw it coming. I never thought my baby shower would start like this. I was 8 months pregnant, finally carrying the baby I'd dreamed about for years. After all the doctor visits, the surgeries, the failed attempts, I was about to have my first child. I'd spent weeks planning the day, making sure every little detail was perfect. The pastel balloons, the cupcakes, the soft acoustic music playing in the background. I had hoped this would be a day I could look back on with joy, a moment where I could finally feel proud of myself in front of my family. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something might go wrong. It had always been that way. My family had never really seen me for who I was. I wasn't like my older sister Lily. Lily was everything I wasn't. Perfect, successful, put together. She was the one who always had everything handed to her while I had to work twice as hard just to be noticed. I wanted today to be different. I wanted my family to see me as I was now. Not the awkward, quiet second daughter, but someone who had finally found strength. I wanted them to recognize that I was ready to be a mother, that I had made it. The house smelled like cinnamon and frosting, the kind of sweet, comforting scent that made everything feel warm. I adjusted a few cupcakes on the table, the tiny gold bows I'd tied around each spoon glinting in the light. The music played softly, and for a moment, I let myself believe everything would go well. But then the sound of heels clicking against the hardwood floor cut through the calm. Lily had arrived. She was always like this, entering a room like she owned it. Perfectly put together as always, her designer dress, flawless makeup, hair that looked like it had been styled by a professional. She seemed to glide through the air while I had to fight for every inch of attention. And as she walked into the room, I could feel the tension building. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was more like a nagging reminder of everything I'd never be, no matter how hard I tried. Darla, my aunt, followed behind her. She was clutching a fruit tray, the kind you get at the grocery store, clearly just a last-minute afterthought. She didn't even greet me properly, just a quick, stiff nod. I forced myself to smile even though I felt the sting of their indifference. It didn't matter. I kept telling myself, it didn't matter. They were here. That's what counted, right? Then Lily came over to me. She had something in her hands, and I knew deep down that something was off. As she revealed it, my heart dropped into my stomach. She had brought a stroller. But it wasn't just any stroller. It was old. Rusted. One of the wheels was bent, the fabric torn and dirty. It looked like it had been pulled from a dumpster. I stared at it in disbelief. For a moment I thought maybe I was seeing things, but no. It was exactly what I thought. A broken, ugly stroller. The room went quiet, and I felt my cheeks burn. I forced a smile, but it was nothing more than a thin mask. I didn't know how to react. I wanted to scream, to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Lily smirked, her eyes glinting with something that felt like victory. "It fits your life," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Alone and falling apart." I blinked, my heart racing. The words hit me harder than I expected. I tried to force them down, but they just kept coming back up. How could she be so cruel? My own sister, at my baby shower in front of everyone. And then I heard my mother's voice, low but cutting. "She's lucky she even got invited." My breath caught in my chest. The sting of her words, so casual, so dismissive, sent a cold shiver down my spine. It was as if I wasn't even her daughter anymore, just some afterthought. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. Not here, not in front of everyone. I looked at Michael sitting beside me, his face calm and steady. He didn't speak, but his hand brushed against mine under the table, a silent question. "Are you okay?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just nodded slightly, hoping he'd understand. But the truth was, I wasn't okay. Not at all. I felt my chest tighten, like I couldn't breathe. The whole room felt suffocating. I was used to being the one ignored, the one overlooked, but today I had hoped for something different. I glanced at Lily, unable to look her in the eye, but I could still see her smirk from the corner of my vision. It was the same look she'd always had whenever she thought she had the upper hand. When she'd get a dig in at me, or when she'd make sure I knew she was better than me. Why did her words still hurt so much? After everything I had gone through, after all the struggles to get to this point, why was I still letting her get to me? Why was I still hoping for her approval, for my family's approval? The room was heavy with tension, so thick I could almost feel it pressing against my skin. Someone coughed awkwardly near the snack table. A plastic fork clattered to the ground, but no one laughed. No one even tried to make light of it. It was just silence. And I hated every second of it. I forced myself to look at the stroller again. It was a sad sight. One of the wheels was bent inward and the fabric was stained and torn. A faint smell of dust and mildew clung to it. It looked like it belonged in a junkyard. But that was my life, wasn't it? I looked at it and I thought, this is me, abandoned, forgotten. I tried to speak. I really did. But the words were stuck in my throat. I couldn't even find the strength to say anything. So I just nodded, trying to pretend this was all perfectly normal. That being insulted by my family in front of all my friends and guests was just something I had to accept. I felt the heat rising in my face. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and walk out, but I didn't. I stayed. I stayed because that was what I always did. I couldn't bring myself to look at Lily. Her presence in that moment felt like an unwelcome shadow hanging over me. I could feel the weight of the room pressing down on my shoulders, but I knew I couldn't show any weakness. Not here, not now. I glanced at Michael again. His eyes were on the stroller, then on me. There was a quiet intensity to his gaze, something steady that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't anger. It wasn't panic. It was something else. Something calculated. I didn't know what he was thinking, but for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt less alone. But still I said nothing. I kept my eyes on the stroller, pretending it didn't sting. Pretending it didn't feel like a personal attack. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating, until Michael finally stood up. His movement was slow and deliberate, the way he always acted when he was about to do something important. I held my breath, wondering what he was planning to do. Was he going to confront them, yell at them? I wanted him to, but at the same time, I knew that wasn't his way. Michael never acted on impulse. He always thought ahead. And right now, I was starting to realize that I had no idea what he had in mind. He walked over to the stroller, crouching beside it as though it were a rare artifact, something worthy of examination. I could hear my mother's voice, soft but dismissive, saying, "It's the thought that counts," as if Lily's gift wasn't a slap in the face. But Michael didn't look at her. He didn't respond to her at all. Instead, he simply placed his hand on the stroller and inspected it carefully, as though he were evaluating its worth. And then he looked at me. The moment our eyes met, something shifted. A spark of understanding passed between us, silent but deep. His lips parted slightly, and he whispered so low that only I could hear it. "Just wait." I wasn't sure what he meant, but somehow that simple phrase gave me the strength to keep breathing. The knot in my stomach loosened just a little, and I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I didn't know what was coming, but I had a feeling that something was about to change. Something none of them saw coming. I looked at the stroller again, wondering what Michael was up to. I didn't know why he was so calm. This was my family, and they were humiliating me in front of everyone. The sting of their words still burned, but Michael's quiet presence was like a shield. A reminder that, even in this moment, I wasn't completely alone. As I sat there, forcing a smile to mask my pain, I tried to ignore the growing sense of unease in my chest. I told myself it didn't matter, that the day was about me, about the baby, and that I shouldn't let them get to me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about the stroller. It was about years of living in their shadow, about wanting to be seen and valued by them and never quite measuring up. Michael didn't rush. He took his time, moving with the kind of quiet focus I'd always admired in him. His fingers brushed over the handle of the stroller, tracing its worn edges like he was studying a puzzle. I didn't know what he was looking for, but there was something in his movements that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. And then, just as I thought I might snap, just as the pain was about to overwhelm me, Michael whispered again, barely audible to anyone else, "It's not over." I didn't know what he meant by that, but I could feel my heart start to race in anticipation. The silence in the room seemed to deepen, like everyone was waiting for something to happen, something big. Michael didn't say another word, but his eyes met mine once more, and in that moment I knew he had a plan that none of them could have expected. I sat there, frozen for a moment, letting the realization settle over me. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The room felt like it was holding its breath. No one spoke, no one moved. Everyone was watching Michael, who continued to crouch beside the stroller with the same intense focus. His fingers moved delicately over the frame, tracing the worn-out edges of the stroller as though he were uncovering a secret. The silence stretched on, each second feeling heavier than the last. My heart was pounding in my chest, but somehow, Michael's calmness soothed me. Even if I didn't fully understand what he was doing, my mind raced, but I couldn't take my eyes off of him. Lily's smug expression was slowly fading, her arms crossed tightly as she watched him. I could see the flicker of confusion in her eyes, but she wasn't willing to admit it yet. She was used to being in control, used to making people feel small, especially me. But Michael wasn't intimidated. He wasn't backing down. Finally, Michael stood up. He brushed the dust from his jeans and looked at me, giving me a small, reassuring smile. There was something almost mischievous in his eyes, a quiet confidence I hadn't seen in him before. Without saying a word, he reached beneath the handle of the stroller, sliding his hand into a hidden gap between the frame and the base. I caught my breath, watching as his fingers pressed something. A subtle click echoed through the silence, barely audible, but enough to make everyone in the room pause. I could see a small shift in the stroller's position, a slight mechanical hum. The air seemed to crackle with anticipation. I couldn't help but wonder, what had he just done? Lily raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by the noise, and then looked at Michael, her expression growing more confused by the second. "Michael," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "what exactly are you doing? It's a stroller, not a magic trick." But Michael didn't answer her. He simply looked at her, then back at me, and whispered once more, just for my ears, "Just wait." I felt a rush of warmth flood through me, a surge of hope. For the first time in this entire day, I had a sense that something was about to turn the tide. And then it happened. The stroller began to move on its own. At first it was subtle. The bent wheel slowly straightened. The fabric, once torn and faded, seemed to smooth itself out. And then, the most incredible thing, a soft, melodic sound filled the air, like a lullaby from a tiny speaker hidden beneath the stroller's handle. The room went dead silent. All eyes were now fixed on the stroller, which seemed to be transforming before their very eyes. And then it happened. The panel on the side of the stroller, which had once been cracked and warped, began to open slowly, like a secret compartment sliding open. Beneath the damaged shell, a new, sleek, and sophisticated stroller emerged, revealing a plush, luxurious interior that looked more like something you'd find in a high-end baby store than a rusted, abandoned item. A soft light blinked on the handlebar and a touchscreen lit up, displaying temperature controls and a built-in monitor. It was beautiful, elegant. Nothing like the old, broken exterior they had all seen just moments before. I gasped. The stroller wasn't broken at all. It had been a disguise, a shell. Beneath it was something far more remarkable, something no one, especially Lily, had expected. The room shifted. The murmurs started. I could hear some of the guests exclaiming in awe, others whispering to each other, unsure of what had just happened. But for once, I didn't feel the sting of their whispers. This time, I felt a quiet sense of triumph welling up inside me. Michael was smiling now, his eyes locked on Lily. He stood up slowly, walking back over to the stroller and tapping another small button. The wheels rotated into a self-balancing lock, and another sound echoed through the room. "It's something I've been working on with a friend from my engineering program," Michael said, his voice steady and calm, but carrying just the right amount of confidence. "Was going to surprise you next week, but I guess Lily helped me reveal it a little early." He glanced at her, amusement flickering in his eyes. "It's built for durability, city terrain, safety. It's a little rough around the edges, sure," he added, looking at the outer shell of the stroller, which was now folded neatly and hidden beneath the new design. "But sometimes the best things do." Lily's face was a picture of confusion, her lips slightly parted, as if she didn't know how to respond. For the first time, I saw her thrown off her game, and it was more satisfying than I ever could have imagined. The guests began to stir, a few clapping from the back of the room, some laughing, others shaking their heads in disbelief. One guest even whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "That's actually genius." I couldn't stop the tears that pricked the corners of my eyes. They weren't tears of embarrassment or shame like I had feared. They were tears of awe, of gratitude. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't invisible anymore, like I wasn't the second daughter, the one who always had to fight for a place. I was seen. I stood up, my hand resting on the stroller, my body trembling with a mix of emotions. My heart was racing, but there was a quiet steadiness to it now, a calm certainty. I turned to Lily, my voice steady and calm as I spoke. "Thanks for the gift, Lily," I said, my words carrying more weight than I expected. "You were right, it does fit my life." Lily blinked, clearly not expecting this. I let the silence hang for a moment before I added, surprisingly resilient, full of hidden strength, definitely not falling apart. Her jaw tightened. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The look in her eyes said it all: shock, confusion, and a flicker of regret. And just like that, the battle was over. The room was still buzzing, but I wasn't focused on them anymore. I wasn't thinking about Lily's smirk or the sting of my mother's cold comment. All of that faded into the background as I stood there, my hand resting gently on the stroller, feeling a strange sense of pride filling me. The guests were still murmuring among themselves, some of them laughing, others exchanging glances of disbelief. The awkward tension that had hovered over the room for so long was beginning to dissolve. The stroller was no longer a symbol of my family's cruelty. It had become something else entirely, a symbol of my resilience. Michael was by my side now, his arm gently brushing against mine as he stood next to me, watching the room react to the transformation. I didn't need to look at him to know he was proud of me. I could feel it, the way his presence anchored me in this moment. He hadn't fought my battles for me, but he had given me the strength to fight them on my own. I glanced at Lily one last time. Her face had gone pale, her eyes wide with shock, but she wasn't the one I was concerned about anymore. She had spent so many years making me feel small, making me feel like I would never measure up to her. But now, for the first time, I realized that I didn't need her approval. "Thank you, Lily," I said, my voice calm even though inside I was shaking with relief. "You really did help me. I know exactly how to move forward now." I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, and it was enough to make my chest swell with pride. This wasn't just about the stroller, or even the way she had tried to humiliate me. It was about everything she and my mother had done to me over the years. It was about reclaiming my power. I didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. I had already proved it to myself. The room had gone quiet, everyone still processing the revelation. My mother, who had spent so many years undermining me, was now sitting silently at the table, her glass of lemonade untouched. For once, she didn't have the words to cut me down. I stood there for a moment longer, letting the silence wash over me. And then, without a word, I turned and walked back to the stroller. It stood there in all its glory, an unexpected masterpiece, hidden beneath layers of judgment. And somehow, it felt like it was finally a reflection of me, strong, resilient, and full of surprises. As I ran my hand across the sleek surface, a soft voice chimed from beneath the handlebar, a gentle melody that I hadn't expected. It was a lullaby, the kind I had always imagined hearing when I held my baby. The voice, soft and warm, said, "Hello, Mama." I smiled. The words weren't just meant for the stroller, they were meant for me. I wasn't just a background character in my own life anymore. I was seen, I was heard, and I was more than enough. I felt Michael's arm around my shoulders, pulling me close as the room slowly began to settle. The air felt lighter now, as if a storm had passed and left everything cleansed in its wake. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling his warmth next to me, feeling the baby kick gently inside me. For so many years, I had spent my life in the shadows. I had always been the quiet one, the one who never quite measured up to my sister's standards, the one who had to fight for every scrap of attention, every ounce of validation. But today, I realized something. I didn't need to fight for their love anymore. I could feel the transformation within me. It wasn't just the stroller that had changed. It was me. I wasn't the same woman who had walked into this room. I was stronger now, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had the power to define who I was, regardless of what anyone else thought. The guests began to drift back toward the snack table, a few of them glancing at me with surprised smiles. There was no longer that awkward tension in the air, no longer that feeling of being invisible. I wasn't fighting for approval anymore. I was simply living, and that was enough. I turned my attention back to the stroller, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Michael had gone above and beyond to make sure that when the moment came, I would have something beautiful, something that was mine. And as the stroller sat there, its lights still blinking softly, I realized that it wasn't just a gift for the baby, it was a gift for me, a reminder that I was worthy of good things. When I looked over at Lily again, her eyes were no longer filled with smugness. She was standing by the door, her arms crossed tightly, but there was something different about her now. She wasn't the one with the power anymore. I could feel the change in the air. The look in her eyes wasn't just surprise. There was something else there too. Regret. As Lily turned to leave, she muttered something to Darla, but no one paid attention to her anymore. The sound of her heels tapping against the floor was the only thing left of her presence, a retreating rhythm that echoed in my ears. Darla lingered for a moment longer, standing by the door. She looked at me, but there was no judgment in her gaze. She didn't speak, but I knew something had shifted. She wasn't leaving because she was disappointed in me. She was leaving because she realized she had underestimated me all along. And that was fine, because I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that room hours ago. I was someone new, someone stronger. I walked back over to Michael, who had been watching me quietly from the side. I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder as we both gazed at the stroller. It was perfect, just like our life was going to be. And then, for the first time in a long time, I realized something that changed everything. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's where your strength grows. The room had almost emptied by now, the final echoes of whispered conversations and clinking glasses fading as the guests drifted away. I could still feel the weight of the day, the tension, the humiliation, the unexpected triumph. But now there was something else in the air, something lighter, freer. I stood there for a moment, my hand still resting on the stroller, my mind racing. I had never imagined my baby shower would turn out like this. I had hoped for a day filled with joy and celebration, but instead, I had found something far more valuable, my own strength. I looked down at my belly, feeling the life inside me, my son, Lior. His name meant my light, and that was exactly what he had been for me even before he was born. The 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test had felt like a miracle, a promise that despite all the pain and struggle, I was going to be a mother. But today, in this room, I had learned that I was more than just a mother. I was a woman who could stand up for herself, a woman who didn't need anyone's approval to know she was worthy. Michael walked over to me, his hand sliding gently around my waist as he pulled me in close. I leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was fighting to be seen. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. Lily had tried to humiliate me. My mother had dismissed me. They had both underestimated me. But that wasn't what mattered anymore. What mattered was the person I had become. What mattered was the family I was about to create with Michael and the strength I had found in myself. I looked up at Michael, my heart full of gratitude for him. He hadn't fought my battles for me, but he had given me the space to fight them myself. He had never once made me feel small. His quiet reassurance had been all I needed. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft, as though he already knew the answer. I nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "I am," I said, the words feeling more powerful than I could have ever imagined. I felt something inside me shift. A quiet, steady confidence that I hadn't known was there before. It was as if everything had come full circle. I had spent so many years bending myself into someone else's version of acceptable. I had always been the quiet one, the one who needed validation. But that was over now. Michael kissed the top of my head, his lips warm against my skin, and for the first time I felt at peace. The weight of the day had lifted, replaced by a calm, unshakable sense of self. I turned back to the stroller, running my hand over its smooth surface. The voice inside it chimed again. "Hello, Mama," a reminder that this was my life now, one that was full of strength, surprises, and quiet power. The voice wasn't just a part of the stroller, it was a reflection of me. I looked over at Lily, who was now standing by the door, her purse in hand, clearly ready to leave. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had just happened. But I didn't need that from her. I didn't need anything from her anymore. Her eyes met mine as she stood there, frozen for a moment, unsure of what to say. But she didn't have to say anything. The look in her eyes spoke volumes. Regret, maybe. Confusion, definitely. And maybe, just maybe, a small spark of realization that she had misjudged me all along. Without a word, Lily turned and walked out the door, her heels clicking against the floor, retreating from the confrontation she hadn't expected. Darla followed a moment later, her eyes briefly meeting mine, but she didn't speak either. For once, I didn't care what they thought. I didn't need their approval. I had finally realized that I was enough, just as I was. And that was more than enough. I stood there for a moment longer, my hand resting on the stroller. I could still hear the soft, repeating "Hello, Mama" in my head, like a lullaby I didn't know I needed. It was a promise that I had always been worthy, even when I didn't believe it. And in that moment, I knew that my son, Lior, would grow up in a home where love wasn't about competition, where love wasn't something you had to earn. He would know his worth, not because he had to prove it, but because he simply existed. As the last of the guests filtered out, I exhaled slowly, leaning into Michael as he wrapped his arms around me. We didn't talk about Lily or my mother or anything else. We talked about Lior, about the life we were going to build, about our future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like everything was exactly as it should be. My life, our life, was finally mine. I smiled to myself as I looked down at the stroller, my fingers brushing against the note Michael had hidden beneath the handlebar. I opened it slowly, unfolding the small paper that read, "For you, CE. For every time they made you feel like less. This is to remind you that you've always, always been more." Tears filled my eyes, but these were not the tears of pain I'd expected. These were tears of healing, of closure. For the first time in my life, I felt whole. I looked up at Michael, my heart overflowing with gratitude. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice stronger than I had ever imagined it could be. He kissed the top of my head again, and in that moment, I knew this was what family was supposed to feel like. This was love. This was support. As the last of the guests left and the house grew quiet, I stood there for a moment longer, taking it all in. The world outside seemed to be moving on, but I was finally in the right place, at peace with who I was, with who I had become. And that was everything.